The ranch had been silent for so long that even the wind seemed to hesitate before crossing it, as if afraid to disturb a man who was already halfway gone. Elias Crowley lay on the narrow bed near the window, his breath shallow, each inhale scraping his lungs like dry leaves dragged over stone. The doctor had stopped coming 3 days ago, leaving behind a single brown bottle of medicine on the table with a quiet look that said more than words ever could. "Make it last," he'd whispered, because they both knew there would be no more. Outside, the land Elias had worked his entire life stretched toward the horizon, faded grass, split-rail fences, and a sky so wide it once made him feel immortal. Now it only reminded him of how small a dying man truly was. He had no family left, no children to inherit the ranch, only memories and regrets stacked heavier than the pain in his chest. He had been a hard man in his youth, proud, stubborn, slow to trust anyone who didn't look or live like him. And yet, as death crept closer, those old walls had begun to crumble piece by piece, leaving behind a strange clarity that frightened him more than the illness ever had. Near sunset, as the shadows stretched long across the porch, Elias heard footsteps, soft, uncertain. He turned his head toward the window and saw her standing near the fence. She couldn't have been more than 12. Her dark hair hung loose, tangled by wind, and her dress was torn at the hem. She clutched her side as if holding herself together by sheer will. Elias tried to sit up, but pain flared, forcing him back down with a grunt. He hadn't seen anyone walk up his drive in weeks. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself upright and called out, his voice thin and cracked. The girl flinched but didn't run. Instead, she stepped closer, eyes wide but steady, carrying a fear that came from experience, not imagination. When she reached the porch, Elias could see the fever in her face, the tremble in her hands. She spoke softly in broken English, asking for water. He nodded and motioned her inside, every movement costing him. She hesitated at the doorway, as if crossing it meant entering another world, then stepped in barefoot on the wooden floor. Elias poured water with shaking hands, watching as she drank greedily, spilling some down her chin. Only then did he notice the blood seeping through her dress. His stomach tightened. He asked where she came from. She pointed toward the hills, where the land turned rough and wild, and whispered a single word, tribe. Elias knew the stories. Everyone in town did. The nearby native community lived quietly, mostly keeping to themselves. But people talked about shamans, ancient medicine, curses, and spirits. Elias had never paid much attention. He'd been too busy surviving. Now, with death breathing down his neck, those old tales echoed differently in his mind. He asked her name. Ayana, she said. He asked what happened. She didn't answer, only pressed her hand harder against her side, her face contorting in pain. Elias swallowed. He knew what he had to do, even before he admitted it to himself. He guided her to the bed and helped her lie down, then reached for the brown bottle on the table, the last of his medicine. The doctor had said it might give him another week. Without it, maybe days. His hand hovered over the bottle, trembling. He thought of the land, the fences he'd fixed with bleeding hands, the mornings he'd woken up grateful just to breathe. Then he looked at the girl, barely clinging to consciousness, and something deep inside him shifted. He remembered his mother once telling him, long before bitterness hardened him, that a man's worth wasn't measured by how long he lived, but by what he gave when it mattered most. Elias uncorked the bottle and poured the medicine into a spoon, lifting it carefully to Ayana's lips. She swallowed with difficulty, eyes fluttering. He gave her more water, then tore a clean strip of cloth to bind her wound as best he could. She winced but didn't cry out. When he finished, she looked at him with an expression that cut deeper than any pain, pure gratitude mixed with disbelief. She whispered something in her own language, a sound that felt ancient, heavy with meaning. Elias didn't understand the words, but he felt them settle into his chest like a promise. As night fell, the girl drifted into sleep, her breathing shallow but steady. Elias lay back down, exhaustion crashing over him. The pain in his body surged without the medicine, sharp and unforgiving, but he welcomed it in a strange way. It reminded him he was still alive, still capable of choosing kindness over fear. The night was long. Elias drifted in and out of consciousness, haunted by dreams of his past, faces he hadn't thought about in years, moments when he could have chosen differently. Sometime before dawn, he heard movement. Ayana was sitting up, her eyes clearer, the fever broken. She touched her side, then looked at him in wonder. She spoke softly, thanking him again, her voice stronger now. Elias smiled faintly, though his vision blurred. He told her she'd be all right, even if he wasn't sure about himself. As the first light of morning crept through the window, Ayana stood steady on her feet and bowed her head deeply toward him. Without another word, she slipped out the door and disappeared into the pale dawn. Elias lay there, staring at the ceiling, the pain now constant and crushing. He wondered if he'd made a foolish choice. He wondered if the ranch would even matter once he was gone. His breathing grew ragged, and he closed his eyes, preparing himself for the end. But then footsteps. Not soft this time, firm, purposeful. The door opened, and a presence filled the room, heavy and undeniable, like the air before a storm. Elias forced his eyes open. Standing at the foot of his bed was an old man wrapped in traditional garments, his hair silver, his eyes sharp and knowing. He held a staff carved with symbols Elias had never seen, but somehow recognized. The man stepped closer and spoke in a calm, resonant voice. "You gave life when your own was fading." Elias tried to speak, but no words came. The old man placed a hand over Elias's chest, right above his failing heart. "Now," he said softly, "we will see what the spirits decide. And if you felt your heart tighten at this moment, if you want to know what happens next, what the shaman does, and how one selfless choice changes everything, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because Chapter 2 will reveal a dawn that no one saw coming, and a miracle that challenges everything we think we know about fate, sacrifice, and the power of compassion." When Elias woke, the pain that had ruled his body for weeks was gone, not dulled, not distant, but completely absent, as if it had never existed. The shaman sat beside the bed, chanting softly, the sound low and rhythmic, like the earth breathing. Morning light spilled across the room, and Elias realized he was breathing deeply, fully, for the first time in months. His chest rose without struggle. His hands no longer trembled. Fear surged through him, followed by disbelief. The shaman opened his eyes and met Elias's gaze, a calm certainty in them. He spoke of balance, of a life freely given, calling out to be answered. The medicine Elias had surrendered was only a symbol. The true healing came from the choice he made when no one was watching. Outside, Ayana stood with her people, alive and strong, her wound already closed. The shaman warned Elias that such mercy carried responsibility. His life had been returned, not as a reward, but as a duty. Elias understood. By sunset, he walked outside, feeling the soil beneath his feet as if for the first time. He knew the ranch would no longer be a place of isolation, but of refuge, where fences meant protection, not division. And if this story moved, if you believe one act of kindness can change a destiny, subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because stories like this remind us that sometimes, when we give our last hope away, it finds its way back multiplied.